I'd like to call to order our August 5th, 2024 board meeting and welcome everyone here. We're looking forward to a brand new school year starting hopefully this week. We will kick off the meeting with our invocation and our Pledge of Allegiance from Trustee Mike Satterfield. Mr. Satterfield.
Thank you, ma'am. If we'll bow our heads, please. Dear God, as we step into the unknown of this new school year, we turn to you with open hearts. Bless us with your wisdom, grace, and enduring love. Protect our children as we strive to educate them socially, emotionally, and academically. Be with each educator, parent, community member, and with this school board as we work together for the good of all students. May your light shine upon our paths, illuminating our way forward. Grant us the strength to face the challenges, the humility to learn, and the compassion to love. May we have mercy, peace, and love be yours in abundance. Amen. If we'll stand and say the pledge, please.
All right, that brings us to number 8 on our agenda, which is the school board spotlight. Dr. Ross and Ms. Taylor.
All right, Ms. Taylor.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board, Dr. Ross, good evening. We are celebrating tonight, obviously, the start of a new school year. This year, so far, we welcomed our faculty and staff back to school on Thursday. They have enjoyed a lot of team building activities in the schools, and today began their professional development training. And so we are looking forward to a great year with all of them. And then on Friday, we had our kickoff celebration. We heard speeches from our District Support Employee of the Year, District Teacher of the Year. We recognized Ms. Wanda Pearson of Crossroads Intermediate School for 44 continuous years of service to School District 5, as well as Mr. Steve Kane of our District Operations staff for 42 years of continuous service to School District 5. We heard Dr. Ross's vision for this year, and definitely we've gotten this year off on the right foot. So we thank all of you who were able to be with us on Friday for our celebration. We thank you, Madam Chair, for your inspirational message that you gave. And just looking forward to a great year. We are really looking forward to getting our students back on Thursday and hoping this weather holds off so they can come. And with that, I will thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor. And that brings us to our superintendent's report. Dr. Ross.
Thank you, Madam Chair, trustees. As wanted to say that we are monitoring the conditions from the tropical system or storm of Debbie. We have a meeting with emergency management and superintendents tomorrow at 10 a.m. And so after that meeting, we'll meet with our principals and make sure that we message if there are any changes to the schedule out to our public with as much time as possible. So I just wanted to make that update. As always, we are a system guided by 3 critical questions. Why do we do this work, our vision? How do we accomplish that vision, our mission? And then what are our outcomes? And meetings like this serve as feedback to ensure that we're aligned to our vision, which is we love and grow our students, our mission, which is focused on the academic, social, emotional growth and development of our students, and then our outcomes. Our outcomes are measured by our strategic plan goals. We have 24 of the strategies aligned to the 4 goals. Our focus this year is on improving the system. At our kickoff rally on Friday, we talked about ways of identifying ways that we can make our system more effective, and the only way that we can do that is together. So growing together becomes our theme. As indicated, we have 3 major priorities as an administration this year. The first one is supporting the classroom. That's both the teachers and the students and their needs in the classroom. We will talk about a lot of different changes that are going on to education as teachers are coming back. They're receiving a lot of information of all of the new updates. and as well as their new student rosters, so supporting the classroom needs. I want to thank you for basically your feedback to understanding just within the academic needs of a class, how varied those are and how much those teachers need those supports. As always, we're focusing on teacher retention and recruitment. As Dr. Wicker brought our plans and our partnerships to you in terms of our what we're doing for teacher retention, but also working on appreciation and recognition of our teachers. And last, we are living in a time of constant change. Change is the reality. It's happening faster and faster. And part of our 5-year facilities plan is really ensuring that we thrive in that change. So making sure that our students are in a safe, healthy, and productive. I think if we look at the future of work and college and career readiness, it's really about making sure we are in a safe, healthy, but also a productive learning environment. Are we preparing our students for their futures, which is becoming more and more different from our past? So at this time, I'd like to update on a new environment that we have in our community now at Chapin High School. So I'm going to ask Mr. Wiseman, Dave Wiseman, our Executive Director of Operations, to come forward and talk about the Chapin High School Stadium project. Mr. Wiseman.
Good evening, Madam Chairman, members of the board, Dr. Ross, members of the community. Thank you for allowing me a few minutes to talk about the Chapin High School project. As you know, it's been almost 1.5 years since we started this project. Just to kind of take you back to what it was. This is what we started with in about March of 2022 with the renderings and the plans on site, but this is just the old stadium, and what you'll see is a really different look. As we begun the process, the goal was to make sure that we had enough seating for the 4A stadium, 5A stadium seating, which is at least 5,000. Right now, I think the count is that we're at 5,777, if my math is right. But we started with the visitor side, put in additional seating on there, and then we moved over to the press box. They tore it down. They started remodeling it from the ground up. And this is just a distant view of it. You can see how the colors kind of pop on you as we get closer. This is from a view from the inside, looking over to the visitor seating. The blue seating in front of you are the Booster Club seatings that provided. There are 316 of those seats. So then that's, as we get closer to the press box, you can see the blue and the stairs on the outside. And this floor right here is the multi-purpose room. We'll be outfitting that with some chairs and tables and stuff to provide services for the school and other folks. And this is the view of the press box itself. And I actually went up to the 5th floor and took that other picture. And if you're faint at heart, you may not want to go up there. Even an old guy like me was a little bit hesitant about getting up there, but it's really safe, and it's a beautiful view. You can see most of Chapin from that view. But as you can see, you've got 2 rows of windows, one for the press box on the top, which is, depending on who you talk to, is the 3rd floor or the 4th floor. I think the engineers are calling that the 3rd floor. And then the glass right above the seating is the multi-purpose room. So you'll be able to see a lot of good views from both of those areas. And we were working with the Booster Club last week, Friday, working on getting the sound system and everything in place. We went up there and looked at it today. They've got a lot of it moved over. We're meeting tomorrow to go talk about connections. And then we have a OSF briefing meeting on the 7th for the inspection, which requires us to make sure that we have the fire alarms, that when you pull them, it shuts off the PA system so that they can make announcements. So we're working through those details, and right now on August 16th we're planning our ribbon cutting at 4:30. Pending any questions?
Any questions? Ms. Huddle?
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but are the restrooms or the concession, did anything else change besides the press box and the seating?
Well, we've done some work on the field house. They separated some of or improved some of the restroom facilities inside the field house. Yes, ma'am. And the concession stand is now on the first floor. It's completely usable now. I think we're going to try to use it on the 16th. I know the Jamboree's that day, so I think it's operational now. Might need to do a little touch-ups, but as of Friday when I was in that area, cleaning up, putting in some tables and stuff for them to operate on, it's pretty functional. So they got a new concession area, place to store their food, and it's also where the sports store is going to go, the Chapin store.
Any other questions for Mr. Wiseman? All right.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you very
Wiseman.
much.
Excuse me. As our teachers return, we are now preparing for some of the provisos and legislation updates. And I want to, as we go through these, just keep in mind as we work with our teachers, they're coming back to a lot of updates from everything from bloodborne pathogens and class rosters and student records to things of reading training, or it's called letters, and new standards. So there's a lot of training, a lot of update. We have some grace with our teachers as they learn these, but we want to bring these forward to you to show what we are messaging out to our teachers and staff. So I want to start with some of the legal updates, and we'll have our Chief of Student Services and Planning, Dr. Harris, to come forth.
Good evening to Madam Chair, members of the board, Dr. Ross, and community, persons who are viewing from online. I wanted to take this approach tonight as we look at these legal updates is to talk a little bit about State Proviso 1.120, which is about student privacy, give a little background in terms of it as it relates to the Comprehensive Health Education Act, and then also give some highlights, if you will, regarding the federal law. Secondly, would address the State Proviso 1.103, anti-bullying and school safety, and then follow up with our next steps, next steps here in School District 5. So when you think about the Comprehensive Health Education Act, that essentially, if we can sum it up in one word, is really about gender. And so I wanted to highlight that and start there. And start there by way of some background. You can't read probably some of that from the person behind me. So I'll try to go through some of that, and I won't read that word for word, but I'll give a pretty good highlight, I believe, of what that says. This particular act has its own code, section 593236, and it simply says this. There are two parts of this act. Item A says that a nurse, counselor, teacher, principal, or other official or staff at a public school, which is essentially any of us who are members or staff of a particular school district, shall not knowingly do one of two things, either one of the two things, and that is, one, shall not knowingly encourage or coerce a minor or a student to withhold information regarding their perception of their gender, which is inconsistent with his or her sex. We cannot coerce or encourage a student to withhold that from their parents. But part two of that is that we ourselves, those same persons that are listed above, nurse, counselor, teacher, principal, or other staff member, cannot withhold that information from the parents ourselves. So in other words, if Michael wants to be called Michelle, or if Michelle and vice versa, Michelle wants to be called Michael, then we cannot encourage students not to share that with their parents, nor can we not share that with parents ourselves knowingly. But part two of that, which is kind of highlighted in red, is an addition, and it simply talks about the fact that a principal, when we know that a principal, vice principal, or counselor at a public school must, in fact, notify in writing immediately the parents when the student simply asserts that they have a perception that their gender is inconsistent with their biological sex, and or if a student requests that they address themselves by a particular pronoun or title. So again, if Michael wants to be called Michelle, or Michelle Michael, or be preferred as a he prefers to be called her, or her be preferred to call him, that information has to be notified now immediately in writing to parents. That's kind of a new portion of that. These things we're currently doing here in School District 5. I'll simply say this page here, I'll sum it up by saying that it's all about training. as it relates to that particular Comprehensive Education Act. It's about training and professional development that we have done and continue to provide ongoing, as recent as today, as we met with our school counselors to make certain that we are all on the same page and operating on the same sheet of music. Another portion thing that I'll highlight on this particular page that we didn't get a chance to talk about this, though, confirm it rather, is that we have a vector system that's available at the start of the year where all of our staff will go online to look at different bits of information, whether it's OSHA training or what have you. This is one of the additions that we now have, thanks to our technology team for assisting with that, that all of our staff in School District 5 will now go through this information, understand this particular Education Act, as well as the proviso that's attached to it, that I'll get to in a second, and sign off that they have received, read, and understood that. So that is something that all of us will be made aware of as it relates to this particular information. So with that having been said, there is that proviso which talks about student privacy. Again, I'm going to highlight this because there was a lot of verbiage on that, so I'm going to highlight that and raise maybe perhaps 2 points. You see green and red there. What those green and red simply say that they are essentially definitions. They are defining what changing facilities are, what restrooms are, what sleeping quarters. In both sections of that, green or red, it highlights what that means and what they mean by that when those terms are being used. Overnight field trips are another example. But I want to bring to your attention that here in this particular state proviso, that item A3, which talks about sex. It says sex, it means a person's biological sex. I want to emphasize that at the state proviso, biological sex. And it also indicates that school districts are who violate the proviso are subject to financial penalties. And so that is another point that I wanted to highlight. This is fairly new to us. We're again providing training and professional development to our staff to ensure that all of us are duly aware of that. And that's what the state advises of us, and that's what that it's based on biological sex on the one hand. That's what we're having to address, a student by his bio. But then there's the federal law, which talks about how the student identifies. So we have the biological sex by state, and then we have the federal law, which talks about identification, how the student. And that's found there in that case called Grimm and Gloucester County School Board, which was within the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, whereby it basically indicates that a school board says, hey, okay, Mike Harris, we recognize that you were born a male and that you're going to use the bathrooms according to your biological sex. However, in doing so, that particular school board violated that student's Title IX rights. Though there were court orders, though there were amended birth certificates and all information that was provided, that particular school district in this Grimm case did in fact discriminate on the basis of sex as it relates to Title IX. So what is the takeaway here in South Carolina in particular, but namely here as we talk about School District 5, what is the takeaway with that particular federal law? Is that the bottom line is highlighted in blue, that we must allow transgender students to use bathrooms that align with their gender identities. That's federal law versus biological sex, which is state law, as well as the amended records that go along with that. I bring that up for this particular purpose, and I wanted to highlight state versus federal, because I think it's important that you as a board know and are very keenly aware, and I think it's important that the community knows that, again, we've got a state level proviso. We also have a federal level proviso. Both have penalties on both sides. Somewhere in the middle is where school districts are caught betwixt and in between. And that's where we have to live there. And so we're having to find ways in which to support our students and support families when we're having to look at both state and federal different laws. And so what do? That page simply talks about the fact that we rest and we believe very strongly about the relationships that we have with our students and our families. The communication that we have established and the ongoing communication that's established with those students and those families. And this district and administrators are hard at work ensuring that the communication continues to flow and that the relationships and the bridges that are being built buying between schools, school systems, and families continue to stand very strong, stand very firm. So we're acknowledging the law. We're relying very heavily on the support plans that, again, supports and emphasizes and highlights and depends very heavily on the relationships and the communications, and certainly based on the requests that are made by the students and families themselves. And we do that as we greatly anticipate the connections, hopefully, and the bridge that's being built between state and federal law. We certainly look forward to that. It's important to know that that this is done because this actually, while it is a bit of a conundrum for a school system, for School District 5, and while there are several questions that we raise among ourselves and with legal counsel, this process actually works for us. It's working for us in the interim, and we wanted to highlight that for you. The next proviso is that of the personal electronic device. That's the next proviso that we have here, and that simply says this to us. In this, it's termed Proviso 1.103, Anti-Bullying School Safety. This too has funding. Anyone who's receiving funds allocated to the state aid to classrooms talks about the prohibition of access to personal electronic communication devices by students during the school day. We are greatly anticipating and waiting on guidance, greater guidance, other than the 4 or 5 lines that we have here from our state, recognizing that on January 1, this becomes law. So what do we do August 8th? Between August 8th and January 1, we're in a position, school districts are in a position of trying to determine how do we implement, how do we apply, what do we do in the meantime, essentially for the first semester of the school year. And what we've landed on is this: had an opportunity to meet with all of our administrators at the elementary, intermediate, middle school, and high school levels. And one thing that resonated throughout all of those conversations and those meetings is the fact that, well, we could simply do nothing. We could just simply rest, sit still, and do nothing. Or we can simply wait until January to see what we do and just kind of go cold turkey. In the middle of the year, decide that we're going to change very abruptly a policy or implement a policy or a law January 1st. That's going to be a major challenge to do that in the middle of the school year. What we've landed on is that we have a policy currently that at least gives us some guidance in the interim. It's a policy that at least gives some support for administrators in the interim. It's a policy that at least gives some suggested consequences or discipline, if you will, in the interim as we wait for the policy from our School Boards Association and or the law January 1, whichever comes first. Again, I note that we are greatly anticipating early August, as we've been told, that this perhaps a school board model policy will come forward. So as we look at in terms of our current policy, the activation, implementation of the current policy, again, building those strong partnerships with our parents to assist us as we continue over this first semester to educate, provide awareness, teaching opportunities, taking advantage of teaching moments. Those are the kind of things that we have decided in terms of an administration throughout the school system at all levels, that is what we do as opposed to doing nothing or as opposed to waiting to January to start to do something in the middle of a school year. I think that gets us at least 50, perhaps even 75% of the way of what we anticipate is forthcoming if we continue to activate the current policy that we have. I think, okay, that was my last page. So with that, we'll conclude. I will be glad to respond to any question that you might have, but I have attempted to give you a very quick highlight regarding Proviso 1.120 student privacy, as well as State Proviso 1.103 anti-bullying and school safety. Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Harris. I'm going to actually start. I have a couple of questions regarding some of your slides on the Proviso 1.120, the student physical privacy. I I know that you're mentioning that there is a battle between the federal proviso and the state proviso. But haven't we been directed by our state superintendent of education and by our attorney general that South Carolina is not following that proviso, and that I feel like some of your slide might be in contradiction of what the advice from our state officials are telling school districts, I mean, directly to us. Boys are going into boys' bathrooms, girls are going into girls' bathrooms. We're not having that conversation. And I feel like our district's policy already has that in place. I just want to make sure we're not creating confusion. Because right now it kind of sounds like we're being told that we need to follow the federal proviso, which is highly controversial, which, I mean, the whole subject is highly controversial, but from where I'm sitting, we're a South Carolina school district, not getting wrapped up in federal drama and politics, and we've been directed by the people that, you know, control us, that we don't follow that. So I just
Well, let me
I just want to make sure I'm not mishearing you.
Yeah, well, okay, and I appreciate the question. This is not a presentation that suggests that we're following the federal. That's not what I'm suggesting. I'm simply suggesting that school districts are caught in the middle between state and federal. That's the message, I think. If there's a takeaway, I think that's the message there. And we're having to determine how do we best address that. And yes, we're in South Carolina, the state of South Carolina, and we know, and that's what we've been teaching and providing guidance along that. We're following the law. And in each case, we're consulting legal to make certain that we're following the law as we know it and as we understand it. So it's not a presentation to say, yes, we're going to follow federal law because federal law is at a higher level than the state law. That's not the message that I'm suggesting. I'm simply suggesting that we are in between two different kinds of laws, and we're making do with what we have, and we're following it in accordance to what we understand and how we understand these laws to be written. I think that's basic.
Okay, I kind of feel like that's a little confusing, because I think that there should, I mean, I get that, you know,
Yeah.
we're trying to follow the federal and the state, but I believe, I mean, and I could be mistaken, I've had a lot going on, but I thought that there was an injunction on that federal proviso, and so really, I mean, and the state proviso takes precedent for us because of that, and I want to make sure we don't open ourselves up to lawsuits
Right.
of something that may or may not be happening. I mean, from what I understand in my conversations with Dr. Ross, we already have policies in place in our district on how we handle those situations that conform with what the state guidance is for, you know, for us. So I just want to make sure that that's not changing. And that's why I brought that question up. The other question that I had on a slide was you were talking about a form. One of your slides had a form on what the teachers were giving about preferred names, and that they can't ask for preferred names. I know that in the past, we've had situations where we've been emailed because they were asking for preferred pronouns. And since we're talking about gender, is that included on that form or not?
It is on that form. It is
So
on that form.
pronouns and preferred, like by
There is a
preferred
section
names.
in Power School that asks for preferred names, and that's what we're referring to.
So we can't have that now. We're not having that now. We're not asking about preferred pronouns.
We're not asking for it. We're not asking for that from the student. No, we're not
Okay.
asking them that. They may suggest or to ask us for that, but we're not going out asking, what do you want to be called? No, we're not doing that.
And we're not, okay, and whether or not you prefer a he, she, they.
That is correct.
We're not asking those questions. Our
For
teachers
any
are not.
student.
Okay, with any student.
For
Okay,
any
I just
student.
wanted to ask that as we were reading this, because those are questions that I get asked.
Right.
Ms. Huddle?
You're really hitting on something that I feel like this form is not in policy. It's not an R policy, and we don't really have a policy. When I saw these slides, I went and looked through our policy, and our policy doesn't, I couldn't find where our policy addresses gender or sex in bathrooms, changing facilities, or overnight stays. So as uncomfortable as it may be for all of us, I really hope that we will put it on the agenda to look at policy, because only then is it clear that we are following the law, and only then is it clear for our parents as well what the policy and procedure is.
And I think that's a great idea. One of the things that we had talked about at our board officer meeting was, and I don't know if it will happen now, but we do have the school law conference coming up this weekend, and there are several people that were involved in creating the proviso. And I've had several conversations with folks that were involved in writing the proviso as well, and how that translates into school district policies. I mean, I know every school district can create their own policy, but as we're kind of going into like this realm of things that will likely be challenged, we want to make sure we're tying it back to legislation, and making sure that we have everything firmed up on all of the items that you were touching on. So I think that was kind of the thought process of, we were going to address it at this meeting, that, hey, we're paying attention to this, we're going to implement whatever is correct in District 5. But, I mean, we're probably also going to have to change the cell phone policy. And we're trying to see what that looks like as well, and making sure that we're doing it tying into all of this new legislation. I think that's a great idea.
We're very hopeful for more guidance on both of those subjects.
Right. Any question, Mr. Scully?
Yeah, and I will respectfully disagree a little bit with you, Ms. Hines, on the federal law. I will not ever recommend that we not follow federal law. We follow the law, and I don't think we should put that out there. Regardless, just follow law, federal and state. I understand your point about the contradiction, but please don't get the message that we're recommending not to follow federal law. My question, Dr. Harris, though, is in the requirement that does say the principal, vice principal, or counselor shall immediately notify in writing, what does that consist of? How are we responding to that? What does notification in writing mean to us? Is that text, email, letter? Is it how will we do that, just for clarification purposes?
We're conversations, as I talked about the relationships and communication, it's conversations, sharing with them what we know, what we've been told. If the student comes to a counselor, for example, and says, this is where I am, sharing what we know, and then finding ways of how we best support that student and that family.
So how do we notify the parents under that provision?
There is in one of the links that you have, there is I'll tell you which one it is. I think it's under that the gender nonconforming request. I think it's under that one, if I'm remembering correctly, that there's a document there that actually is what we share with the families.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Ms. Snipes?
I have a sort of a question / comment. I wondered if all of the schools, I'm thinking it's probably a no, but I wondered if all the schools had one single stall bathroom. And I asked more so from the mental health piece, as Rebecca, in the meeting, but as Rebecca mentioned, just kind of hearing from parents and stuff. And one question that I got, or concern, it had nothing to do with them wanting their daughter to use male restrooms, but it was the fact that they have a daughter who does identify as being a lesbian, and her look she just kind of, sometimes their kids are young, they don't know. They know that this girl doesn't necessarily look like what they think all girls look like, and how her child will sometimes just not go to the bathroom or try to go without going, not because she wants to go in the other bathroom, but because when she goes in the girls' bathroom, sometimes they tease her. And so this conversation just kind of made me think about that, but then it also made me think about the mental health piece and the counseling piece, and some of the things that tie to this, that we are talking about right now. Because as a parent of 4 children, I want to know everything that's going on with my kids too. So, hey, I get that wholeheartedly, but I also recognize that all kids aren't being raised in homes where they can have open conversation. So I'm not saying that to say that the school obviously shouldn't do what they need to do, but just wondering as we think about the mental health pieces and making sure what kind of support are we providing for our students as they're figuring some of this stuff out too.
Dr. Russ, do you want to talk a little bit about the individual bathroom stalls and?
Thank you. I just want to put that caveat, we all follow the law. And one of the things that Dr. Harris and his team are doing, and this is for years now, when we put in the non-conforming support plan, I want to kind of walk you through what happens. We already have this in place. So we have always taken the stance that this is a family conversation. It is about relationships. It is about family. So there's not a situation where it's brought to our attention that a child wants to change a gender or a name, and we're doing this in isolation. We are going to bring in the family, and we go through a non-conforming request and non-conforming support plan. What's the new changes, and what we typically see is I'm uncomfortable using the restroom with a certain gender. Does not necessarily give me access to another gender. It gives me access to a single stall. And we have handled all of our situations. Sometimes, what we want to make sure, though, in the plan is that if I'm on a very large campus, that access is equal to the access that I would get with anyone else. That I would not have somebody walk way across the campus to a single stall or a shower where no one else had to do that. And so our plan is, if you're at this part of the campus during the day, here's your facility. You're in that part. If you're on this part, you can think of, I'm thinking like a place like Chapin High School. It's an aircraft carrier. It's a very long. So that plan works that out so that you don't have that. And it's not always a situation of gender. There are situations where students that just don't feel comfortable showering with other kids. It's not an issue of their gender identity or anything. Middle school, right? So we have this happen a lot. The notion that for us is the parents are already involved.
Absolutely.
What Dr. Harris's team is doing now is that child may have been in middle school last year where they knew the plan. We are having those conversations before they get to high school in day one with the families. So they understand this is a new campus. I don't know this area. I knew the middle school layout. And so where we know these situations, these plans are in place with the counselor. What has changed now is that when the staff hears it, it was not, this was not mandated for us to have it. We want to make sure all of our teachers know, all of our coaches know, all of our, anyone who's a staff, that all of you know that if this is something that comes across, we do have a non-conforming support plan. It does not necessarily have to be a lone gender. It is a lot of students who just very uncomfortable in these spaces now. So I just wanted to kind of tell that whole story as a quick question but a long answer, but just kind of give that it gives access to multiple points of single restrooms across the campus.
Absolutely. Okay, I'm going to switch gears from the gender policy to the personal electronic device. And I have a question regarding the first part of this year, and kind of a question or a thought to kind of put into my fellow board members' ears on like how we draft a policy and how we're implementing policies in the schools right now regarding, so we think of it as like, we're calling it the cell phone policy, but wouldn't it also apply to like your Apple Watch? Or Dr. Ross had mentioned that there are now like these super fancy glasses that I do not have on that like put things across the lenses. Like, I mean, I feel like we're on the Jetsons or something, or what the Jetsons thought it would be. I don't know. But I mean, so I guess my question is it, and the way that Dr. Ross had explained it to me earlier last week about trying to implement a policy before we implement a policy in the school so that we're not just throwing everything on January 1. Is that applying to like watches or glasses, or should it? Or, I mean, how are those distracting it? I mean, I guess the glasses thing that I said where you could cheat or something. I didn't even know that those glasses existed.
Don't tell me.
But apparently they
Don't tell them
exist.
they exist.
And Dr. Ross has seen them.
Yeah.
So I guess that's my question, because a lot of kids have
Sure.
the watches.
Right.
So how does that work? What do we think? You
As
might
we,
not have an answer.
as we understand it, and as we also anticipate what's forthcoming, that these 4 or 5 lines that you have on there does include your Apple Watches and all of those different kinds. It does include, I anticipate that's what's going to be included there. I cannot say for certain, but based on how this is written, it does suggest that those things will be included. What we do know is that the cell phone is perhaps our number one issue, and that's where we wanted to start.
So we're just kind of trying to enforce the cell phones right now, not necessarily like the watches or things. I mean, that's going to be very interesting to see in practice how that works. I mean, I don't know.
the
I
whole-
just think,
absolutely, I
I
agree
feel like
with
the
you.
cell phone conversation really has started because everybody's on the apps and on
Right.
social media and they're talking like that. But a watch, you're not necessarily doing that. You're, I don't know. I could be wrong, but did you have a question?
I did have it's kind of a suggestion. Have we thought about maybe doing something intermediate, like maybe after fall break? Like maybe just, you can bring them, but they must be turned off? Something like that yeah, cold turkey, especially right after Christmas and you got your brand new whatever. It's just a thought, is maybe something, an interim step. And that way also, I know a lot of parents are concerned about, well, if there's an emergency or whatever, well,
Yeah.
you can still turn it back on. You can just, I think it might be easier for the teachers too, having to police it, it's supposed to be off. Just a suggestion.
I'll be interested to hear what the PAC meetings say, or your advisory committees say at the beginning of the year about what they think about this policy or how to best implement it. It'll be interesting. Mr. Scully?
Yeah, regarding the cell phone, what about hearing aids? My hearing aids are connected to my cell phone. I hear, like if I need to hear
Sure,
you,
right.
I have to go in the app and adjust the volume and I can hear you.
I
How is
can-
that gonna be impacted by cell phone bans?
I can anticipate, Mrs. Scully, that it perhaps may be all-inclusive. That's what I anticipate. Students who have get the glucose readings, for example, they're just in medical issues, who use their cell phone. We have discussed just a litany of different options and areas of concern, quite frankly, regardless to how we perhaps implement or start this on August 8th, as we anticipate a model policy and/or the law coming into effect January 1. We ran the gamut of that. So
I would
hear the
think that we would
suggestion,
have an
and I
exemption for a
received it.
medical. For a medical thing, I think we would talking about federal law, I would think we would have to have an exemption if there is a medical need
Yeah.
for a device. I mean, maybe, even, I think that they have apps on phones now for
That is correct.
diabetics or
Absolutely.
things like that.
Absolutely.
So those are like common sense exemptions, I would think.
So we've had this discussion. One of the things we said, before we step out too fast and not have the full weight of discussion through policy, like you were saying, we are just going to enforce our current policy. And so our current policy on cell phones is that they're up. Now, if they're a medical, we have a lot of students will have this in what's called a 504 plan.
There's some provision
And the
for-
teacher would be aware. So we have some who check their blood sugar through their cell phones. We have some that a lot of like you said, whether it's hearing or other cochlear devices, they operate through an app on the cell phone. So that's our family as well. But that would be in their IEP or IAP plan, and the teacher would be aware of that. Our goal, and I think for parents to understand, is that as what we anticipate, and that's why we were hoping that we get more guidance on Friday's legal conference, is this says no personal communication devices during the school day. So that is enforcing that is going to be a major change for our students. You go out to the grocery store or go sit at a restaurant, kids are on devices more than just school. Making sure that they're up. There's certain districts that are buying the pouches for them. Some teachers have the shoe cases that they put them in, so there's a lot of different things. I do want to say in our current policy, there is that notion of teacher discretion. We are moving away from that notion of using this for educational reasons, because we know where the policy is going January 1. So this is not cold turkey. You'll never have a phone enter our building, but this is when you enter the building, these are put away. If you need it for medical reasons, that's already communicated through your IEP or IAP, but it's put away during the class time. The only other thing I'd like to say, and then I'll pause, is that at the secondary level, at the high school level only, our current policy does allow for free zones, which is change of class and lunch. That's in our current policy. We will message throughout the year as we get more information, as we discuss as a body, the board policy. We will message that any particular changes that would come out of that to our families. But we felt like our administrators and our teachers and our schools could implement our existing policy better as we transition to the new state model.
Okay, Mr. Satterfield.
Yeah, thank you. And I was going to just add a couple of things. Number one is, years ago we had a cell phone policy when cell phones first became the thing. We had issues with MySpace. I don't know how many of you are that old and remember MySpace. But that was the first sort of bullying, the social media bullying that we dealt with. But we had a pretty good policy with regards, they had to be off when the bell rang and they could turn them back on. If kids need to reach their parents, they go to the front office like anybody else, like you used to do in the old days. I don't call it the old days. But I think the issue that I always felt that it was important for was so it doesn't interfere with instruction, so that kids are learning and they're not on their phones. We have a real issue with kids, adults too, but kids that are addicted to their cell phones and they're constantly looking down at those cell phones. And if you want to do something about your test scores and improving the kids' attention spans and ability to learn and listen in a 90-minute block to what the teacher's saying, cell phones are here to stay. And if you think students will be upset when you take a cell phone, wait till you talk to their parents. Because the parents are the ones that want to get in touch with the kids every 15 minutes. They tell them sometimes, go to the bathroom and shoot me a text, or something like that. But I think as long as the policy, whenever it's contrived, if it's just really consistent and pretty basic to the point where if it affects bullying in schools, and I understand that's what it was originally here for, but so that it doesn't interfere with instruction, because we want to do everything we can to help students learn more. I mean, that's why we go to school. But I'm really confident that with a little common sense and a little thought, you're never going to be able to hit every angle. When I was at Dutch Fork High School, we had kids that were using scientific calculators like communication devices. So the kids are pretty smart. But I'm confident that we'll be able to come up with a good, clear, concise policy so that it doesn't interfere with kids' learning in school and that it affects, we can cut down on the bullying. So thank you.
Anyone else? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Harris. And now to speak on, we have a change that took effect as of August 1st. We want to make sure that we open school in compliance with that new regulation. So our Chief of Academics, Ms. Tina McCaskill, will come forth to share how we are addressing this until the board takes up model policy.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Board, Community. So Regulation 43-170, we talked a little bit about it back in June, but on June the 25th, this actually was sort of signed into law to become law as of August the 1st. And so this statement that I have here, you will find on our website under the challenge materials, and it's also what you see where KECR has been adapted just to have this statement. As of August 1st, 2024, Regulation 43-170, Uniform Procedure for Selection or Reconsideration of Instructional Materials, replaces all KEC, KECR, and KECE until a final policy can be approved. There's a complaint form that parents would use. That's the state-approved complaint form, and it is to be emailed to Amy White, who is the secretary of the school board, and her email address is there. Because we don't have time for 3 readings of a policy before August the 1st, this takes the place of KECR, the admin rule. But of course, when we look at what's here, it's very similar to some things that we've already talked about, so that's a good thing. But the key points are that instructional materials should be age and developmentally appropriate and aligned with and supportive of South Carolina's instructional program. If a parent or guardian of a student who attends school within District 5 has a complaint about an instructional material, they should first contact the teacher and or the school administration. So that's really important for parents to understand that if they have a problem, they don't fill the form out immediately and send it in. Go to the teacher, go to the principal, try to work through this. A lot of the concerns can be worked through. If not, then you fill the form out and email it to Ms. White. And then the local school board has 90 days to hold a public meeting where the board either gives their decision or provides the decision in writing within 15 days of the meeting. And the local board will have to decide whether you want to hear it as the full board or whether you want to name 3 members that will hear it and then bring it back. But then the complainant may also appeal it to the State Board of Education, and they will have 30 days to hear it, whether the book is appropriate or not. The one thing that I do want to point out, is within the law, and you have a copy of this, but within the law, we're speaking of cell phones, right? Within the law, there's a list of exactly what we're looking at in this particular regulation. And we're really looking at sexually explicit content to make sure that we don't have sexually explicit content in our schools. So we're not just saying, I disagree with anything in this book. We're really looking at sexually explicit content. So I do want to call attention to that. And the form that the state created, I feel like the second page of that form is really well done. It gives a really nice summary and tells the parent exactly what they're looking at. So I really thought that was well done. But our next steps are to maintain a complete and current list of catalog of all books in the school libraries. We already do that. That's posted on our website. That's through our Destiny, so we do that. Review and, if necessary, revise existing instructional material. Change policies to comply with the timeline outlined in the regulation. I will tell you that with that, this summer our principals have come together and created a process for approving supplemental materials. So our elementary has one process, and then our secondary has a second process that has been talked to and given professional development to teachers this week on. So we have a very consistent process for that approval. And then being prepared to generate a list of any materials available within the classroom setting. We have purchased a addition to the Follett software so that we can put classroom libraries in digitally. It can be scanned. The scanners were actually shipped out today. So our schools should be getting those scanners very soon. And then schools will be working towards getting those taken care of so that links can be provided for those classroom libraries. Again, this is something that's new. Our goal right now is to just get students in schools, get teachers settled, get them, ready to go and teaching students. And then our administrators are going to provide support to make sure that those classroom libraries are getting scanned in. So that's not going to happen today or tomorrow, but it will happen over the first 9 weeks of school. If a parent comes in and requests that, then we'll have to make that a priority, because as of August 1st, we would have to give that to a parent if they request it. So I will answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you, Ms. McCaskill. I noticed on the slide, and I believe that I knew this going into this when they were talking about this in the spring. But one of the unique parts of this law is that if a school district, or if a book is removed by the State Board of Education from, let's say, District 5, it will be removed from every school district in the state. So you won't have multiple school districts challenging the same book. That's correct?
That's correct. But the state school board has
The
to make that
state-
decision.
If the state school board makes that decision, or so if we decline to remove a book and it is challenged to the State Board of Education, and the State Board of Education removes the book, it's going to be removed from every school district in the state. Have they discussed how that, is there just like an email that's sent out to the districts? And
There
then-
is, in the memo that I put in the packet, there is a link there to a website, and there's a spreadsheet on that website where they plan to update anytime that happens. It doesn't say it here, but I would assume that we would get an alert that something has changed.
Okay.
That's what I would assume, but they are going to keep that where it's public, and there's a spreadsheet where that would be found.
So it kind of sounds like it's going to be up to the district to make sure that we're paying attention to that spreadsheet and informing each individual, because every school has different books in the classrooms and in the library. So that's going to be a responsibility of the district to do that.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Satterfield.
Yeah, I had a couple of questions. So we don't have a committee anymore of educators and parents, and so this directive, I was reading through this long directive. So we have to put together a committee that includes 3 board members. Now, Dr. Ross will.
Or the entire board. That's the
Or the
conversation.
entire board. Now, if somebody contests Moby Dick, we all have to read Moby Dick before we make a decision on whether or not Moby Dick stays on the shelves?
It actually doesn't say that you have to read it. It says that the complainant has to read and give you specific pages and examples of why they are complaining and why they think the material should be taken out. But it does not specify that the board must read the entire book.
So while the book is being challenged, does the teacher have to stop using the book? It says they can challenge all books, textbooks, instructional materials. So if they challenge a textbook, the textbook cannot be used
That is
until it
correct.
goes through the process. Another question I had was the supplemental materials. You know, teachers over the years collect a lot of supplemental. I mean, if you've been teaching for 25 years, you got file drawers full. They have to get all that approved?
According to the law,
Yeah.
yes, they do.
So they can't use it in the class until they get it approved. And so if I'm a 9th grade history teacher, social studies, current events, so to speak, who approves that? My department head or the API or the principal?
All right, so if you're in a secondary school, the process is that you start with your PLC group, have your PLC group review it with you as well. Then it goes to your department head, and then the department head takes it to the principal.
So every teacher in that department, listen, again, I use social studies because
That's a big one.
that's a big one, yeah, humanities. So all those teachers, if they have supplemental materials, they cannot use them throughout the year or at the beginning of the year until everybody gets everything approved.
That is correct. That's what
And
the
we-
law says. Not Tina, that's what the law
I
says.
understand. I'm just trying to figure out why we don't trust teachers.
I'll tell you, Mr. Satterfield, I'm going to tell you what I've said to teachers, because some of them are very upset over this. They really
I would
are.
imagine they would be.
And what I've said to them is, here, I'm giving you some time back. because you've got curriculum frameworks that the district has provided. Teachers have worked on them, our coordinators have worked on them. They are beautifully written to where you've got resources, you've got everything you need to teach the standards are right there. Let's use that and not go off and use your time to go pulling and grabbing other things.
Right. And you know, like I know, though, Dr. Ross did his presentation, and I used this earlier with this 8th grade class, and you got levels from 2nd grade in 8th grade, from 2nd grade on up. So that doesn't work for every kid.
No, but you know what's so great about it? I have access to kindergarten through 12th grade as a teacher. I have access to
But it's
every
not-
curriculum
but if it
framework for
doesn't-
every grade level.
But the way this law, and you help me if I'm wrong, the way this law says, if it's not age and developmentally and meets the rigor of that grade, can I use it without approval?
You can. If it's been approved already, if it's on our district curriculum frameworks. So anything, kindergarten through 12th grade has been approved.
Okay.
Now, when you talk about rigor of the grade level, you've got to be able to scaffold that. So depending on the child's needs, you're getting them to the rigor by scaffolding that material.
I'm just thinking, after watching so many great teachers over the years and knowing all the hard work they put into collecting all this great information, and you don't just become teacher of the year by following the state standards. But I just hate to think that those teachers cannot or will not have readily available to them all those things to help those kids. I mean, if you're a special education teacher, my goodness, all the resources. And if you get on what a lot of teachers do, the one good thing about technology is teachers can get on the computer now and they can find all these great learning sites and they pull from them. But if they can't use them,
If they haven't been vetted, now we've got a large list of computer technology sites that have already been vetted that they have access to. So we have a large amount of that that's
Okay.
already there. And so that's there for them. And I understand the angst. I do understand the angst. What I hope that I'm taking the positive side of this.
right?
Is that what I hope is that we can give ourselves some time back and realize that maybe some of the material that we had in the past may or may not meet the rigor of the new standards, because we're really transitioning into a phase where we've got all new standards now.
Yeah.
Science was recently, actually this is the first full year of implementation of the science. Social studies was just 2 or 3 years ago. ELA's new this year, math will be new next year. So we're really in this age of really new state standards. So this may be an opportunity for us to realign ourselves and look at our materials
Yeah,
and really depend on each other
and
for
I
that.
appreciate that. How many new textbooks are we adopting this year?
So we have all new ELA textbooks this year.
So they have to pull from that. Do you see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
It's really a difficult task to put on these teachers. I see these things sometimes and I think, this person never taught a class in their life.
I
These
would agree with
people-
you on that.
Yeah.
So-
And they're making all these mandates and they don't realize what it takes for a teacher to be successful in the classroom. And you put and it's like, it's so all-encompassing, it's like they hit everything. There's even a remark in there, let me just finish this one last point and I'll be finished, Ms. Hines. There's a remark in there that says, if there's space on a library shelf for a book that's better than the one that's on there, then the school board should replace it with that book.
I do say that, you're right.
That's all. Thank you.
So, Mr. Satterfield, just a couple comments on your comments about the textbooks. So it does say the textbooks, but you have to understand, I mean, I would think, the State Board of Education approves the textbooks. That's what comes to us. So they've already gone through a vetting process with the State Department of Education. And Ms. McCaskill correctly stated this. The intent behind this legislation was sexually explicit material. So while there's other controversial conversations about certain subject matters, that we see in the news or that we've discussed. I mean, we haven't really discussed as a board, in public on anything other than sexually explicit materials, because the only thing that's ever been brought to the board is sexually explicit material. So I think that that was the intent of this legislation, and because there was it was so disjointed among the state, and people were talking about, oh, did you see Fort Mill had this book, or this school district had this book, and they would come and look at our libraries to see if we had it. This is a way to try to take that conversation and distraction away from the instruction time in the classroom, because we're preempting that on sexually explicit material. I think that there's obviously other conversations related to that, and no piece of legislation is perfect, and we'll probably tweak this, and I think that it is expected that this piece of legislation will be tweaked a little bit. I think that it's very unrealistic to think that we're going to get a deluge of textbooks or even most supplemental materials that teachers have been using for years that are probably already approved being challenged to the board.
And I don't disagree with what you're saying, except why didn't they just do it for sexually explicit? Why not just say that? Why is it all inclusive for all instructional materials? And the crazy thing is, this thing went through because it expired.
Mm-hmm. Well, this thing went through because
even
people didn't want to actually vote or shoot it down, because I went to all of those hearings, and the reason why it went through is because people didn't want to get attacked in the media, in my opinion. But that kind of goes off topic. So I'll stop talking. I'm gonna let Ms. Snipes has very patiently had her hand up, and I'm gonna let her go.
Following the theme of Ms. McCaskill's reclaiming our time theme, I just want to know, can people, because on the board, I feel like in the public, everybody has there's one thing that they really care about, and most of the time, that's something that we don't spend our time on. But as far as the book stuff goes, the only concern I have, or question that I have is, so if my kids are all still elementary age level, if I hear about a book at the high school, but my kids aren't even there, can I complain about a book that isn't even impacting my kids? Or can Amanda complain about a book and she doesn't even have kids in the school? Who can challenge these books? Because we could get really lost in the weeds of just, I heard about this, so let me just file it, you know what I mean?
So that's where we hope to get some legal advice with the model policy, because the word says reasonable, a reasonable request. So it says you have to be a parent in the district in order to make a complaint. It does not specify that you have to be a parent in the district within that grade level. It doesn't say that, but it does say a reasonable request. So I think that we've got to get clarification on what that really means, because that's been a conversation that we've had as well.
Earlier on something else, I'm all for parent rights. I just, but I think too, and I feel like nobody up here would disagree, there are a lot of things that pass through here that are pressing or whatever, and I just would hate to see every other meeting we're spending all this time reviewing 5 books,
Right.
and just because, you know what I mean?
And I think, kind of speaking to that, the way that this is written, saying that if it is appealed to the State Board of Education and they remove a book, that and then they remove it from all school districts, I think that one of the reasons behind that, other than if you have something that should not be in one school, it should not be in all schools, and that's common sense. The reason why that's in there is so that you're not having those conversations. You're not having, I know that there's a lot of groups that talk about books, and so they'll start looking to see, this one got removed here, should we remove it there? And that kind of helps alleviate, the need to be double checking those books, or the need for the local school districts to be having those conversations and taking away from other priorities, like you're saying.
That's
I
what
think
I was
that's
worried
kind of
about.
why that was written, in my opinion. But
Reclaiming my time, Ms. McCaskill.
that's right. Ms. Huddle.
I had several questions. First of all, and I don't think it's KEC, don't we already have a policy that requires supplemental materials to get approved?
Yes.
Okay, so that already exists. So the other question I had is, for the board having to look at it, is it, if you had a subcommittee of 3, would it still come to the full board? It would?
Yes.
Okay, and I'm assuming that that would be, these would be public meetings, whether, okay. And then my last question, the second bullet, the review if necessary, revise instructional material. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the policy also said that about library materials too, right?
Right.
Obviously, we don't want to get in the weeds there, but I guess my question is, sometimes publishers put the wrong age ranges on books. Librarians can't possibly read all the books. Are we, as a district right now, already looking at, do we have some, situations of maybe some books with sexual content that's inappropriate? So that I'd like to not have those come to us if we can avoid it. So I'm asking if we're already looking at that.
So we have asked our librarians, throughout all last year, we've asked them to look for anything like that within their libraries that they feel is inappropriate for the students that they have in their library. So they are in the process of constantly looking through that.
And parents can also view, if they hear about a book, I know you don't know, we have thousands of selections, but if they hear about a book, they can go to our website of that school to see what's in there, correct?
That's correct.
Anybody? Mr. Scully?
Yeah, just real quick, this is clarification on, for all of these, and I meant to ask Dr. Harris as well, but we're still on the same topic. For all 3 of these items, either the 2 provisos and this, we called it a law. Is in relation to the effective dates, are they indefinite for all of these, or is there, like, I thought provisos were short-term?
This is a law.
So this is a law.
This is
Yep.
indefinite?
Yep.
Okay. And then the 2 prior, were they, so they expire at the end of the budget year? Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else? Thank you, Ms. McCaskill.
Thank you.
All right.
And that concludes the superintendent's report.
All right, any questions for Dr. Ross at the end of the superintendent's report? I appreciate that very engaging dialogue, respectful dialogue from my fellow board members. Thank you for that.